Greetings, Acolytes of the Force, and welcome back to the Archives. The suit of armor Darth Vader wore was the greatest facilitator of change in his life after Order 66. In fact, just by Vader being in the armor, the entire flow of galactic history completely changed course from where it was heading. The limitations placed on Darth Vader kept him from achieving true greatness, and not only that, but it inhibited just about every action in his daily life. Vader had to change everything about the way he fought, walked, slept, ate, and even breathed in order to accommodate his new cybernetic enhancements. However, beyond all the obvious physical impediments that Vader suffered through, there were many unseen mental and emotional tolls that he had to bear as well. In the words of Sidious, these invisible weaknesses are what truly held the Dark Lord back, and it was because of these weaknesses that Vader would actually fear returning to places and planets such as Naboo. Vader of course avoided basically any and all places that reminded him of his past as Anakin, most notably Tatooine, where Obi-Wan would know to hide Luke. Despite this though, he didn't mind setting up his fortress on Mustafar, the literal place where his whole life took a turn for the worst. So, why is this? Well, my friends, this is what we aim to tackle in today's holocron. But before we begin, according to our librarians, many acolytes that have entered our archives have not yet subscribed. So if you've been enjoying these daily holocron openings, reach out and force crush that subscribe button. It is your destiny. Our source today comes from the Legends novel Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader, in which Vader is sent on specific missions by Palpatine back to the Jedi Temple to do some research within the archives. Vader, though, believed this all to be a cruel joke on behalf of his new master, and was in an extremely bad mood as he was marching through the silent, empty halls of the Jedi Temple. A reminder of Anakin Skywalker, worsening his emotions even further. Ghosts of his past and echoes of the horrors that happened that night of Operation Nightfall permeated through each and every one of the abandoned corridors, seeming to scorn Vader with every step that he took, scorn him for his betrayal, for the monster that he's now become. Though the place has been mostly cleared up in the week since the event, it was still painfully apparent how much residue from the massacre was left behind. How many Jedi bodies had strewn the near limitless hallways. The very rooms screamed at Vader with toppled pillars, shredded tapestries, scorch marks from blaster bolts, and vague bloodstains all on the walls, all of them greeting Vader while he was making his way towards his assignment. He could not help it. Vader's mind began to turn over the events of the previous month, and that fateful day where he changed forever. He ruminated on the failures of the Jedi, their blindness, their arrogance, and how if they had simply granted Anakin the rank of master, none of this would have happened the way it did. Vader thought back to all their corruption, and how they were just dragging the Republic down with them. All of this brought his mind back to Padme once again, an image he desperately tried to avoid. Vader could not help it though. He began to think about how Padme had worked herself up over what he had done at the temple. He then reveals internally that he had been given the chance. He was going to explain everything to her. Tell her what he did was for her and for their child. How the galaxy was now a safe place for them as soon as he assassinated the Chancellor. As soon as he was the new Emperor. But then, Vader's fist clenched tight, and he hunches over as he remembers how Obi-Wan had interrupted them before Anakin could finish, before he could explain himself. In the Jedi Temple, Vader's breathing began to rasp even harder as his anguish and his anger grew. He kept asking himself, why? Why did Padme not listen to me? Why didn't any of them just listen? More and more, Vader's mind circled around this question, and the novel gives us this. He paused at the entrance of the library's vast and towering main hall, shaken not by memory, but by memory's effect on his still healing heart and his damaged lungs. Once more, Vader began to think about the Council and what would have happened if he had not killed them, if he had turned to the dark side, taken out the Chancellor himself, and went public with his relationship. They would never have stopped fighting him until the very bitter end. Vader even suspected that they would try to take Padme and his child away from him, since the child would have been incredibly gifted in the Force. Now, Vader's rage was reaching its apex, where the novel tells us this. Vader's heart pounded in his chest, and the respirator fed his heart's needs with rapid breaths. For his own health and sanity, Vader realized that he would have to avoid places that whipped his anger into such a frenzy. The recognition that he would probably never be able to set foot on Naboo or Tatooine tore an anguished moan from him that toppled the rest of the plinths as if they were dominoes, leaving their crowning Brosnian busts sliding and spinning across the polished, blood-flecked floor. In one more cruel twist of fate, Vader can't even fully allow himself to get angry because his body's response to his anger was actually threatening to kill him. His lungs and heart were in terrible condition, and any strain to them would prove lethal if Vader was not extremely careful. The respiratory system could only do so much for him, and if he were to stress out too hard, he would literally kill himself. His lungs and heart were in terrible condition, and any strain to them could prove lethal if Vader was not careful. His respiratory system could only do so much for him. The Temple on Coruscant, Tatooine, and especially Naboo had the potential to ultimately destroy the Dark Lord. Like we read in this passage, Vader realized he would have to keep away from them at risk of both his mind and his body breaking under the weight of his own anger, the Force itself literally tearing his body apart, his anger tearing his body apart. Sadly, this caused him so much pain that he exploded within the Force, realizing that he would never return to see either the worlds that he had called home and come to love. It's not just as though he wanted to return to Tatooine anyway, unless just to see Shmi's grave. But what stabbed Vader in the heart was saying goodbye to the place that contained all his memories of Padme. Though in canon, we know of when Vader would visit both of these places back to back many years later, whenever these old memories had long passed on Bespin, and Vader was more calloused. Vader would return in 3 BBY after his duel with Luke on Bespin, in an attempt to uncover the secret of what happened those 2 decades earlier when Vader had assumed Padme had died, and their child along with her. This all occurs in the 2020 Vader comic run, and just as he feared, the ghosts of his past came and haunted him in terrible memories and dreams. However, he was physically safe for the most part. As we remember, the Vader whose rage threatened his own life was a raw, inexperienced Sith Lord only a few weeks into his new suit. The Vader that returns to these planets in canon 20 years later is one who has mastered his internal storm, and mastered it in a way to where he is able to conserve his anger. But for the large part of his life, Vader ensured that he would keep as far away from either of these places as possible, for fear of losing his life to his own emotion. But with that said, why Mustafar? Why did Vader choose to hang his cape in Mustafar in his spare time? The planet where Padme died, and Anakin was mutilated beyond recognition. Why would Vader not avoid this the most? Furthermore, Vader's castle was built directly overlooking the very beach where Anakin was burned. To understand this is to understand the duality of Anakin and Vader. The Dark Lord feared and hated one man specifically. That man was Anakin Skywalker and anything left of him. It was his literal weakness. He despises the Jedi Temple because it forces Vader to relive memories of a dead man. To him, Anakin was dead, and those memories now belong to somebody else. That life is gone, and should mean nothing. And yet, if Vader is pulled back to the place of Anakin's trauma, it makes him feel weak and inferior like he did when he was Skywalker. This is the key, separating Anakin's trauma from Vader's. The failure of Mustafar was Vader's trauma, not Anakin's. It was Vader who slew the Separatists, Vader who killed his wife Padme, Vader who fought the Jedi Master Kenobi, and Vader who failed to kill him and ended up paying the ultimate price. The absolute fury that the Dark Lord feels when he looks upon the beach and remembers his overconfidence is what helps him grow even stronger in the dark side. It does not threaten to weaken him. It empowers his raw fury. The difference here is that Anakin memories bring grief, where Vader's memories bring resolve. It's a fine line, but a very important one. But anyway, my friends and acolytes, thank you so much for visiting our archives yet again. What are your thoughts on Vader and Anakin's trauma, and Vader's utter terror of the world of Naboo? As always, my friends, may the Force be with you, and I hope to see you back in the archives soon.